I would now like to introduce our speakers. First of all, Harry Crockett is the Native Aquatic Species Coordinator for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Harry is involved in the conservation and recovery teams for all Colorado subspecies of cutthroat trout. Jason Ryder is a web and database developer at the University of Wyoming Geographic Information Science Center. His recent work on inland trout includes developing web and desktop viewing and editing applications, such as what he's going to present on today, database management, and leading data compilation workshops. Harry's going to start us off with an introduction to the project, and Jason will follow up with a live demonstration of the web app. Welcome, Harry and Jason.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Mary. Okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
Right, well, everybody knows what a cutthroat looks like, but just in case, here's a nice picture of one. It's a beautiful fish, one of the iconic animals of the North American West. It's currently about a dozen recognized subspecies. You can see their generalized ranges on this map on the left. I got this from WNTI, the Western Native Trout Initiative. It's part of the National System of Fish Habitat Partnerships. So it's got some species on it that are not cutthroats. Obviously, you see bull trout there and red bands and some of these others. But most of them are cutthroats, and you can see, again, their generalized ranges here. A lot of you probably know there's some taxonomic reassessment going on, particularly with these two, but fortunately that doesn't really have anything to do with what we're going to be talking about today on this webinar, so I won't get into that. A lot of these subspecies are imperiled to some degree. A couple of them are federally listed. Most of the others are state listed or state species of concern. Major threats, I'm sure, are well known to most folks: competition and direct predation from introduced non-natives, salmonids, hybridization with non-natives, disease, especially whirling disease, which is also unintentionally introduced. And there's, of course, habitat impacts as well, especially on the larger streams, water diversions, dams, historic mining, and kind of all the usual suspects. So here's an example of impacts and range reduction. This is a map showing historical versus current distribution for Colorado River cutthroats. And the gray lines you can see here represent streams where Colorado River cuts historically occurred, and the blue and the red represent the current distribution, and only a subset of those, the ones shown in the red, are secure enough and have pure enough genetics to count as conservation populations. So you see a range reduction of, at least 50% compared to historic, and this is typical of most of the subspecies. The map's also a good thing for us to be looking at because it is an application of the database we're talking about today. This is from the Colorado River Cutthroat team's latest range-wide status assessment, and the authors of these status assessments rely really heavily on the database, not just for making these maps, but for deciding where to prioritize conservation efforts. And I should say that, keeping this database up to date is in and of itself a good collaboration across agencies within the multi-agency team. And a couple of times the Fish and Wildlife Service has actually recognized that in their decisions not to list certain populations or subspecies. So this is the earliest assessment that I could dig up that made use of a database application. Might not be the first, but it's definitely an early example. Was the idea of Bruce May, was then with the Forest Service in Montana. And his idea was to aggregate information at the stream reach level, like you saw in the previous slide, about things like abundance estimates, genetics when they were known, barriers to fish movement, threats, and so on for each known population. But And the innovation that Bruce lobbied the other conservation teams for was to put data for multiple subspecies into a common format. So a lot of the life history requirements are at least roughly comparable across subspecies. So if you want to know whether, just to make something up, population size is correlated with elevation, here's all the West Slope populations, but if you could throw in all the Yellowstones into the same analysis, you could have more populations to look at and gain more power and maybe get a better answer. But you need the common format data platform to support that. So in the course of pitching this idea to other conservation teams, Bruce May connected up with Shannon Albeck, who's the leader of the Wyoming GIS Center where Jason is at. But he was then working for the Colorado Division of Wildlife, my agency. And Shannon really turned this from a data repository into a spatial analysis tool and kind of brought the teams out of the realm of doing spatial analysis with paper maps, which is what they were doing, to doing really sophisticated things. So the Colorado River Cutthroat team was the first to get integrated with a GIS, and the other teams pretty quickly recognized the benefits of that and started going that way too. So I guess, by the way, these coastal cutthroats, they're really a pretty different animal. They're a sea-run, a lot of them are sea-run populations, and the habitat over on the Pacific Crest is very different. So this common data structure that I'm talking about is really intended for the inland cutthroat subspecies, and it's called the ICP, the Inland Cutthroat Protocol. So there we are. To zoom in on the part of the range, all of the subspecies represented by these little tabulary trout icons are all today, they've got conservation or recovery teams that are using the ICP as their common data structure. And actually, so is the red band team, even though that's not a cutthroat species specifically. So what Jason's going to demonstrate today is the next step to make this complicated and sophisticated database structure web-based, and particularly to make it more accessible. So in the past, like I say, it's complicated and sophisticated enough that there's needed to be a fair amount of mediation by the database gurus. And, you know, you'd have to be kind of like a SQL power user to be able to really use it on your own with confidence. So, you know, besides getting it up on the web for authorized users, that was the other goal, was to be able to support more use of it directly by the biologists and the managers who need the analyses. So Shannon put it, quote, "Not everyone can be a data jockey and seamlessly ask questions of the database to help inform management decisions. Hence, we built a web-based graphical user interface to facilitate use of this very rich data set, negating the need to be a GIS whiz and a database nerd." So as of today, we've got the data for the Rio Grande and the Colorado River cutthroats on this new platform. I think the Greenback team is going to make the leap, and we're expecting other teams will come on board as well. And with that, I'm just about to turn it over to Jason for the demo, except that I need to acknowledge some cooperators. Of course, we greatly appreciate the LCC funding, and additional financial support came from WNTE and New Mexico Department of Game and Fish, Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I also really want to thank Becky Mitchell from Colorado Department of Natural Resources. She's with the LCC and brought the funding opportunity to my attention in the first place. And John Alves pulled together the contracts and dealt with all the project management and financial aspects and so on, which is indeed laborious when you get 5 or so state and federal agencies all involved. So with that, I'm going to turn my screen over, I hope, to Jason, and we'll see the demo.
Thank you, Harry. If I can get hooked up here. Okay, I think everybody's able to see my screen, I hope. So I'll just jump right into the application. The address is icp.ygist.org, and the very first screen you come into is an authentication screen. The actual application is not available to view if you're not authenticated. You need to be an authenticated user. There's two levels of authentications. There's a viewer and an editor, and you are authorized to edit one or all or many of the subspecies, and that's done by the GMU leaders is who sets that up. So if you go to the map right away, you just don't see anything. It gives you a note that says you must be authenticated. So I set up a demo here, and I'll log in. Once you're logged in, you have access to the map, and the first screen that comes up, or the first view, I guess, it gives you sort of an overview of all three of the subspecies that are included in this application at this particular moment. The layers are built to display or not, depending on your the level of zoom you have. So you're not going to see everything right away. There's three accordions on the right, which give you navigation tools, a legend, and editing tools. And I'll kind of go through each one of these systematically here. There's also a base map switch, so you have the typical topo or an orthographic view as well. Okay, so the first thing here we see is this find XY location. So if you have a particular XY coordinate that you want to zoom to, you can put it in there and find it. And you can, if it's in a different coordinate system, we put in several coordinate systems typical of this area to try to cover everything. I'll just put one in here that I know works. So you can see that it puts a little yellow pin where you are, just to show you, just to locate yourself. It's not exact, but it'll get you in the area to find your location. The other way we can navigate around is by by species and HUC. So we'll start out with Colorado River. It gives you a list of all the watersheds, the 8-digit watersheds in this particular range. It will zoom to the HUC you select and highlight it. Then you have 4 ways that you can navigate further. You can either go to a particular creek, and again, it zooms to the creek and highlights it. You also have an identify tool, which you can click on the NHD stream reach and get the reach code and the stream name. That's basically just for informational purposes. The next way you can navigate is by the current distribution. Again, it gives you all the current distributions in this particular watershed. So you select one. Again, it zooms to that particular current distribution and highlights it. You can zoom to lakes, if there are any in that particular watershed. And lastly, you can do conservation populations. And again, it selects conservation populations and zooms to it. Now, once you find your particular stream reach or conservation population, you can get information on it by clicking it. Now, there are barriers and current distribution and conservation populations. So when you click on a particular area, it grabs whatever it finds. So you can see here's the barrier that we looked at, that we found. You have this flash tool that shows what you're looking at, what attributes you're looking at. Current distribution, again, it shows you which CD you're looking at. For the conservation population, move that over a little bit. Again, it highlights the conservation population that you're looking at. So the attributes, you can just inspect them in this particular interface. So you have all of the information that's been entered for that. You have genetic information if it's there. It's not always there. Again, you can zoom through those, and that's only for viewing purposes for this. Okay, so the next tab is the Legend tab, and it's a typical GIS tab. You can turn on and off layers just like any GIS. Turn off the conservation populations, on the conservation populations. Now, one of the things here to notice is there are current distributions, and then there are current distributions edited. So we separated them and symbolized them separately so that someone qualifying this data can come in here and turn off everything that's edited and look at it. So that way they can inspect all of the entries that have been edited since the last assessment and check it for accuracy. So anytime something is edited, it changes symbology. And there are separate layers for all three subspecies. So there's the Colorado River, the Rio Grande, and the Greenback. And there is also a base layer for the ownership. This layer, you're able to control the transparency to look through it if you need to, or again, shut it off and turn it on as needed. Now, one quick thing about the navigation. The zooming, you have your tools here. You have a plus and a minus, which are traditional zoom out, zoom in. But also, you can, it's standard Google sort of navigation, so the roller rolls in and out. You can also double click to zoom in. And if you hold down your shift key, you can do a bounding box. So hold down the shift key and just basically outline the area that you're looking for. And as you zoom in, you'll see, you won't see it when you're zoomed out. Let's see here if I can get it to go. So the CP number and the CD number don't show up all the time because it would just be messy. So you'll notice that as you get zoomed into a certain area, those will show up to kind of help you see where you are and see what you're looking at. Okay, so the last tab here is the editing tab. And I will just run through a scenario here. So we'll first find this location. Say we had a particular GPS coordinate here. So you mark and zoom. That it shows up here. This is an area in the Greenback. Now the Greenback right now, the data in here is just a test database. I set it up for this purpose so we don't have to worry about messing up any data. So all this data in here is sort of faux data. And I set up this user to only allow editing for Greenback. So if, for instance, I came in here and you can initially pick the species that you want to edit. Since I'm not authorized to edit Colorado River, it won't even let me in there. Same way with Rio Grande. But if I am authorized to edit a certain species, it shows me the tools that I can use. And these are both feature editing tools as well as attribute editing tools. So since I am authorized to edit the Greenback, what shows up here is when I click on a particular feature to get the information, it shows an edit attributes button. So if you're not authorized to edit, those buttons just don't show up. So if you are, you can go into the attributes, make any changes that you need to, and save your edits. So that next time you look at that information, it should be in there. And you can see this is I just changed that to no longer present. Okay, so the feature editing tools, each one of the tools has its separate tool instructions. So when you click on a particular tool, it gives you step-by-step instructions on how to use it. You can also deactivate the tool and the instructions go away. There's a clean database button, which allows you to, since there's there's two parts of this application. There's a direct access to the database, and then there's actually a service access through the features. So there is a possibility that you edit one and the attributes never come up, something crashes. I haven't really had that happen, but I thought I'd put a clean database in there, which basically deletes any stray data. So if it by any chance locks up, you can clean the database, and it'll delete those basically unpaired pieces. Okay, so we'll just we have some that are in there already. Now everything is based on the NHD flow line. So and everything has to be on those. So if I go to add a barrier that is not on a flow line, it gives you a warning. It says points must be placed on flow line. And the way you do that is there is a snap built in there. And so you can see if you go to place a point, it says add barrier, control key to snap. So we would zoom into an area here. If you hold down your control key, you can see the black X, and it tells you it's snapping to that line. Once you find that it's snapping, you click the point. And what it does is it saves that point to the database. And you can see it's different than the rest, and it's indicating that it's edited. And it opens up the attribute box, and you go in and you put in the attributes for that particular barrier. any comments you might have. And save the barrier. Once it's there, again, you can click on it for information. It tells you that it is a new barrier and tells you all the attributes of that new barrier that you put in. So there's also a move barrier, and you click it, and then you click on the spot you want it to move to, and it just basically moves the barrier. Move it back here. So we will we'll add a current distribution. Now again, everything is based on the NHD flow line. So what this does is it's picking two or more points on the flow line and then basically extracting that flow line and placing it in the database. So to add a barrier, or to add a current distribution, you click on the first point, and then on the second, or many in between if it's a complicated stream reach, and then double-click to end. Again, it places the data in the database as an edited feature. That's what the dotted line is. And pops up the attribute editor. So you can put in the attributes, making these up in case somebody thinks they don't make sense, which is probable. And then some of these are just drop-down boxes where you have just one choice, but like in the habit qualifiers, you have multiple. So you can hold down your shift key or your control key to pick more than one. So if there are, this isn't something that you have to do, but if you have sample population estimate samples, you can put them in here, get the actual density rather than a range, rather than a 50 to 150 fish per mile or 151 to 400. If you have some actual numbers, you can put them in here with the sample date. Do this. Once you little calendar picker, once those two fields are in, it allows you to put in your confidence interval, making sure that's the real number, variance, and the population estimate method. And any comments you might have. And again, when you inspect that particular stream reach, you get all the information that you just entered in here. Here's the population estimate that we just entered. Now, if you need to edit that, again, edit attribute, add any more population estimates if you have them. This is also where you would put in genetic sample information. For this particular stream reach, if you had it, you would go into the genetic sample data, add genetic data, put in the information for the genetic sample, and save it, and it would show up in this distribution. Now there's also, let's see, extend current distribution just allows you to, we'll zoom in a little bit here, just allows you to extend that current distribution. So you select, let me start over here. Your first point is going to be at the end of the current distribution that you want to extend. And again, you're going to want to snap all the time. Otherwise, it won't let you do anything, actually. And double-click when you want to extend it, and it extends that line. There's also a trim current distribution. You select the distribution that you want to trim, and then place a line. That actually, I went the wrong way. Let's see. A line across to where you want it to trim, but you have to go the correct way, left to right or right to left. Select it. Okay, so it does tell you, it says this portion of current distribution symbolized with a heavy black line will be trimmed. And it asks you if that was correct. I didn't read that before. Now the add lake. There are current distributions that are lakes in this database. So in order to add a lake, and it goes through, it says pick a lake, and it has to be in the NHD. It asks you if that's the one you want to add. And again, just like for the stream, you put in the attributes. A lot of attributes for lakes. Okay, then again, it shows you with the hatched line that that's an edited lake or a new one. And again, click on the particular lake and see all the attributes that we just put in. So in this particular, if we had all these distributions, we wanted to put those in a conservation population. We click Add Conpop tool or button and circle all of the current distributions or single current distribution that you want included in there. It highlights them and asks you if it was correct. If it's not, you cancel it and re-circle it. So then it gives you the attributes for the conservation population. It also tells you which current distributions are in that conservation populations that you're creating. So what it did is it made the conservation in the heavy gray line, but since it's new, it's symbolized a little bit differently. It's symbolized with the dotted line rather than solid. Now, if we inspect the element, we have the conservation population. You can see that everything is highlighted here. It includes the lake, as well as the two Conpop stream reaches, or excuse me, current distribution stream reaches that I just put in there. And the attributes, again, you can edit as well with the Edit Attributes button. Okay, there is you can remove CDs from the Conpop if you want. Again, circle the current distribution that you want removed, and it asks you if that's really what you want to do. Say OK. It then removes that particular current distribution from the Conpop. can also add them in. So in this case, you would include the compop that you want the current distribution to be added to in your selection, and it asks you if this CD is supposed to be added to this conservation population. Once you agree, it adds it to that particular conservation population. And so that is about it for the editing tools. There are some safeguards in here. There are scenarios where one particular editor might be authorized to edit more than one subspecies, might be all of them. So if, for instance, I am trying to edit Greenback and I somehow get in a Colorado River area and I go to add a barrier, it tells me you're trying to edit the wrong species. So it recognizes you're in the wrong subspecies range, and none of them overlap right now. And will give you a warning and won't let you do it. And that's even if you're allowed to edit more than one subspecies. Okay, and that is all I have for the demonstration, actually. That's it.
Great. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
We have some time for questions, and so Kevin Johnson is going to facilitate the Q&A session since I don't have control over anything anymore except my phone. So folks in the audience, there's two options for asking questions. You can unmute yourself by pressing *6 on your keypad on your phone, and then you can ask your question. And of course, when you're done asking that question, please mute yourself again by pressing *6. Or you can type your question into that chat box and send it to the host, and then Kevin will read the questions to Harry and Jason. And then Kevin, if there are a lot of calls, Kevin will probably alternate between some chats and some phone calls too, to give everybody a chance to ask their question. So Kevin, do you have any questions?
Well, yeah, so I have one administrative question. Do I need to hit anything on the phone to unmute everybody so that they have the opportunity to speak? No. Okay.
No, I just said that they can unmute themselves by pressing *6 on their keypad.
All right. Okay. So
they can self-regulate.
All right. I do have a couple of questions on the chat line. One of the questions that I have are existing barriers, such as diversion structures, already in the database?
Yes. If they've been put in previously. I guess maybe not all of them. Maybe Harry can answer that closer.
Well, if I understand the question, so we had to build this barrier layer up from scratch over the course of developing the database. So any existing barrier that the team is aware of and has put in there in the past is in there now.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well.
So that kind of leads to a second question that I have on the chat box, and that is, how does one become authorized to be a viewer or an editor? And then the follow-up to that is, if they have information to add that they think should be added to the database, who do they contact, or how does that happen?
Harry? That's probably
Well, I think I might have to defer to you for the authorization part. I'm not quite sure how that works right now, although I think both, let me just speculate that both of those processes are being run through the teams. So depending on which subspecies part of the world you're dealing with, there's a conservation team for each of those, and they each have state representatives. So perhaps, you know, questioner's got a specific place in mind, I can tell you who to get a hold of, but that's probably something that would be useful for us to do, is to put that information up somewhere where people can see it before they try to enter into this application and are stymied. But yeah, each of the conservation teams has got state representatives as well as GMU, Geographic Management Unit representatives on it, and other agencies represented as well. And so you need to get a hold of one of those people to provide that information so it can be put into the database.
Yeah, that's the way that we've done this so far is I've been the administrator, but I really have no idea who should be editing and who should be viewing and who shouldn't. So I've just received lists from various GMU leaders to allow it. I think in the future, what we will have is we'll have a list of however many people that are managing the users, and you would contact them and talk to them, and they would authorize you as a viewer or an editor, whatever the case may be.
Okay, I see I've got Dave Anderson has his hand raised, and so he'd like to ask a question via phone.
Thanks, Kevin. I typed it into the chat too. I wasn't sure which was the best way to go was, but I was wondering how you handle sort of quality control issues, and you know, once you have people approved to make edits in this thing, do you have a system to kind of vet those data? And we're seeing that you have dotted lines here that you were just drawing as you were demonstrating this to us. And is there some behind-the-scenes process that turns those into the solid lines?
Yes. So the way this is going to work, and the timetables haven't really been established exactly, but just as a scenario, if we were going to do this yearly, the database would be vetted by me, for one thing, for database integrity, and the actual application should take care of most of that. It won't allow you to do a lot of things that are going to mess up the database. So once all those edits are done, in whatever time period we're talking about, say if we're going to finish it, everybody's going to have their edits done by December. Once that's completed, the GMU leaders go in and they vet the data and they qualify it. Once they've done that, then they let me know, and I take, and they can make edits too if they see something that's not right. Once they've done that, they give it back to me. I take that database and make it the current database, and then all those lines would turn into solid lines for the next cycle.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, if I could just follow up on that, I think, you know, that was one of the strengths of this process, even going back to before we had this tool, was that the GMUs, the geographic management units, are comprised of the biologists who are working on the ground there, and so those people and the GMU leads in particular are really presumably the most qualified folks to be making calls about, for example, what does and doesn't constitute a barrier, or how far upstream a population extends, and so forth. And so there would be this kind of automatic vetting process where the GMU lead had to sign off on the data before it sort of received full quality status in the database, and then we would go through this process once a year and do any database updates that had emerged out of the season's field work. And then every 5 years, each of the conservation teams, or it's supposed to be every 5 years, each of the conservation teams produces a range-wide status assessment. And the most recent version of the database supports that status assessment. And you can see those, at least for the ones that are represented in the thing that Jason showed you today, the Colorado River, Greenback, and Rio Grande Cutthroat status assessments. You can see the most recent approved ones. You can access those on our website. They're pretty extensive comprehensive documents.
Yeah, I think that's how it's going to go. As far as I know, I mean, that's a little bit beyond my area, but yeah, that's generally how it's going to work, I think.
Okay. I have another question here on the chat, which is there a way to do a data dump for a given HUC or set of HUCs to an Excel spreadsheet? The spreadsheet, and that would be similar to an attribute table from GIS.
No, not right now. And there was some discussion of that, and I think it was, I think the problem is, one of them is we don't really want all the data to be downloaded from this. We just want the ones like the ones that have been vetted and are the data for that particular time, whether it's the status assessment or a yearly interim sort of data set. And that would be the only way you could get that is go through the sort of the official distributor, whoever that may be, whether it's a GMU leader, whoever is responsible for that particular subspecies. I think that's kind of how it works. Is that right, Harry?
Well, that's right as of now.
All right. So I'm not seeing, there's no more questions in the chat box, and I'll open up if anyone on the phones would like to chime in with a question.
This is Richard Bottomley calling from Jones Hole. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I sent a question in the chat. I'm not familiar with webinars, so maybe didn't get to the right person. But anyway, we're a national fish hatchery. We've traditionally produced rainbow trout. We're trying to meet the new national priorities of producing native trout. And so I was interested in this conference today to learn more about access to mapping and that. So do I use the icp.wygisc.org address to do that as a viewer?
Yes. To view the data, you can actually download it or get a copy of it through that website. Is that your question? Sorry.
I think so. So I understand that there's a viewer and an editor. I just am not interested in editing, but viewing. So the way to do that, then, you're saying, is to download the data?
Well, no, you can view this. You can view this data. You just have to get. I guess you have to get permission from one of the GMU leaders or whoever it is that is determined to be that manager. And I think Yeah, I think probably what we're going to end up doing here is have some contacts on the home page eventually that say if you're interested in this subspecies or this subspecies, then contact this person, whether that's John Elves or Harry or whomever it might be. Because as of right now, I wouldn't even know who to tell you to go ask.
Okay.
Each of those, and maybe Harry would, but.
Well, I would. So that's a shortcoming. We do need to make sure you have that information, and also that people can somehow find that out if they have questions like this. So, what subspecies are you interested in?
Well, we had a test group of Colorado River cutthroats that we reared this year, and then we're also producing Bear Lake and Bear River Bonneville cutthroats. I'm not sure if there's going to be application for our fish to be distributed into other streams. Of course, we'll work with managers in the states, but I was aware of your conference webinar today, and I wanted to just learn a little bit more about the mapping and stimulated these questions.
Sure. So if you want, with regards to the Colorado River cuts, shoot me an email.
Okay, and you are?
I'm Harry Crockett.
Harry, gotcha, thank you.
And now for the Bonnevilles, those, as you saw at the start of Jason's presentation, we don't have that subspecies. I mean, that team is going to have to decide that they want to get on board with being a part of this viewer. So they have the database and they maintain it just as I described, but you would not be able to access it today through here.
Okay.
As Jason showed at the start, it's only Rio Grande and Colorado rivers and a little bit to a lesser extent Greenbacks that are into this kind of initial build. So being as I'm from Colorado, I don't know off the top of my head who the team lead for the Bonneville team is.
Yeah, and
I don't know either, actually.
If you put that in your email, and I'll find that out and get you that information.
And I might be able to dig it up here with contacts. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, let's see. I got a few that come in through the chat now. Okay, so I got the speaker contacts. Paul Birdsey from Utah is the Bonneville Cutthroat Trout leader.
Thank you.
And so I can give you the email addresses. Yeah, well, we can give you the email addresses for both Harry and Jason as well at the end of the call.
Okay, real good. And I can get Paul's.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Hearing none, I would like to thank the presenters, Jason and Harry, and we really appreciate you taking the time to demonstrate this and explain to us its utility, and so again, we thank you very much, and this webinar has been recorded and it will be available in approximately a week, and I think with that, we're done. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone, for attending.